Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes podcast, first one of 2023. It's episode number 141. I'm your host, Phil Huber, joined by John and Logan. On today's episode, we're going to talk about buying tools and what we're thinking about when we look at new tools or new to us tools and the buying process. No outside sponsors today, so I just want to put a plug out there for everyone to subscribe to the new ShopNotes magazine. Our first issue is out there, and we've been getting some pretty good feedback on that, nice comments on the projects and articles that are in there. So you want to check that out at shopnotes.com to subscribe to that one. It's 4 issues a year, comes out digitally, and has been a lot of fun to put together. A couple of comments from last year's when we were talking about auxiliary work surfaces. Rick writes, I saw that clutter during the shop tour Logan gave us on our trip in July. Yep, it's everywhere, off camera. My extra work surface is a solid core door attached to one end of my bench that has always been a place to put stuff and has never moved since. Tim writes, I built an outfeed table for my table saw with wheels on 2 legs and 2 standard legs. This makes it easy for me to move about my shop to use in a variety of ways. When the weather permits, I even roll it outside to use for a sanding table. Merry Christmas, guys. And there was one more here. Oh, here, Craig writes, I have an extension table to the right of my table saw to accommodate the long fence rail. This gives about 36 inches in length between the saw and leg supports and 34 inches in height of storage space under the top. I built a mobile cabinet from maple plywood with 3 drawers and has a nice ash top. I can move the cabinet, usually to the lathe, and utilize the top for horizontal use for tools and parts. The top has to be free from clutter to fit back in place under the table saw. The drawers hold table saw accessories. Works great and cost less than $100. There you go.
It's a nice ash top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a big ash top.
Those jokes never get old.
No, they don't. Till the emerald ash borer kills off all the ash trees.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
who's
we
laughing?
just say these jokes wistfully and with a little bit of a tear in our eye.
And the grandkids won't even understand what it is.
Right.
They won't, get the reference. And
Sonny, let me tell you about the pieces of ash I used to get.
yeah.
What do you mean when you say you hang up the phone?
Yeah. Going off topic, speaking of not getting pop culture references, I was driving our freshman to school today, and we had gotten a light dusting of snow, so the roads were a little slick. And we were sitting at a stop sign, and I watched a truck come around the corner and kind of fishtail and speed up and throw snow, and that got me singing the Dukes of Hazzard theme song. And she just did not get the reference at all. Like Bone Luke Duke, Daisy Duke, no. Roscoe P. Coltrane, no, nothing.
Boss Hog, no.
So then it got me down a rabbit hole of what was the dog's name? Does anybody remember the dog's name?
Oh, Roscoe's dog, that big,
I had to look it up because I couldn't remember.
big basset hound.
Yeah. So this is the trivia of the day.
Yeah, I don't know.
I got Google.
It's Flash.
That's right.
Flash was the dog's name. Yep. So then I had to look up. This is something I never knew. What does the P stand for in Roscoe P. Coltrane? I had to look that up. It's Purvis.
Okay.
Roscoe Purvis Coltrane.
Right.
And he didn't get the P added until season 2. So
Okay.
now y'all know.
Yep.
If you remember the Dukes of Hazzard. All from just watching some truck come around the corner and just fishtail and went down the Dukes of Hazzard rabbit hole. So, I don't know. Do you remember Dukes of Hazzard, Logan? Are you too young?
No, I'm too young.
Okay.
So
I would have been pretty young when that was out too. So
yeah. I'm
He's
looking for the
Googling
air
it.
dates.
Yeah.
It finished airing 3 years before I was born.
Okay.
Oh.
So 79 to 85.
it might be streaming somewhere if it hasn't been like canceled by social media.
Yeah, 79 to 85. Wow. I remember the Lost seasons where Bo and Luke were in contract discussions, so they held out.
Oh, yeah.
And then they had their cousins, Coy and can't think of the other guy, take their place. Scabs.
That's right. Yep. Now we know.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Where were we?
Yeah. If you have any other comments about the Dukes of Hazzard, you want to just leave those in the description on our YouTube channel. Make sure you like and ring the bell and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. Here's the thing that I wanted to talk about today, because I think we have 3 related yet very different opinions on how we go about buying tools. And we have one case study, very recent case study among the 3 of us on the tool buying process that I think is both unique and probably more common than we think.
Mm-hmm.
So, Logan, you just recently purchased a lathe, and we've talked about as you're building your new shop and getting it outfitted, you have some rough principles on the types of tools that you want. And I think it's a really good discussion point, because woodworking magazines and publications and websites have a real strong affinity towards the new, recently released, the shiny, the updated kind of a thing. And magazines do tool reviews and publish tool buying guides, and they always refer to the current crop of available new tools, or as recent as possible. So the idea being is that if you're buying a table saw, or in your case, a lathe, you have this wide world of brand new lathes to look at, and somewhere in there is the lathe that you're going to buy. Except you didn't buy that lathe. What lathe did you buy?
So I bought a 2010, 2011 Vic Mark VL300 CS. Yeah. And to be clear on what you were implying, you know, as I'm starting to, I have all the tools I would ever need in my shop.
Right.
But I want to slowly replace those with vintage machinery. This lathe is quite obviously an outlier.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I in my long-term picture, it's an outlier. I mean, it fits in with my current shop stuff. I have, you know, mid-2000s bandsaw, drill press. I have a sauce top.
I thought you were going to say that as a millennial, 2010 is a vintage tool. So
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Now, here's the thing with looking at vintage lathes. Okay, and this is the whole reason I did not buy a vintage lathe.
Okay.
The lathe is the one tool that, in my opinion, I want some modern features on.
Okay.
Modern features. Now, if you look at drill presses, table saws, jointers, planers, there isn't a whole lot of innovation over the last 70 years, right? Like a new planer looks very similar to my 1916 Towsley planer or jointer, right? Like they look very similar. Functionally, there's not a whole lot of difference there. When you start looking at lathes, though, there's big innovations. That's a terrible word. I hate that word. There's been big changes in the way that they're driven. So electronic variable speed is a big thing now. So you're actually controlling the speed of the lathe by controlling the RPMs of the motor. Vintage lathes didn't do that. They had a fixed RPM on the motor, and then either you had to manually change the belt, and you'd have 5 different speeds, and you'd have those 5 speeds only.
Right.
Or you had what is called a Reeves drive.
Okay.
Now, a Reeves drive, and I'm sure some people have seen those. Some drill presses have them. Actually, I think the Powermatics have them, and I think the Rikon we have in the video studio has it. As the lathe or the machine is running, you either turn a wheel or you move a lever. And what that does is there's a pulley in there that expands or contracts. And the expansion and contraction of that changes the diameter of that pulley that's engaged on the belt. So in essence, you're changing the speed or the size of the pulley on the fly. They work well until they don't. And the problem is with a lot of these vintage lathes, like a vintage American-made lathe, there aren't parts available for them. So if the Reeve drive fails, you're kind of stuck. I mean, I think you probably have some options, but I don't know what those options are. It's just not something I want to mess around with.
Yeah.
Now, I like when looking at vintage lathes, I like the fact that stepping out of the woodworking segment into the pattern making industry, you have some really big lathes, and you have some really cool attachments to those lathes.
Sure.
Like, tapering attachments. You have, threading attachments. The pattern maker world is completely nuts compared to what we do. It just was a route I didn't want to go down. And so I started looking. I've been looking for a particular lathe made in Australia for a long time, called the Stubby. It's made by Omega. It's the Omega Stubby. They have the S750 and 1000. And they're a very cool kind of like transformer type lathe. They have a very small footprint, but the beds are on a turret. They spin, they turn. There's a gap in them. They can throw really big wood. However, when I first started looking at them 5 years ago or so, you could get one imported into the U.S. for like $4,500.
Whoa!
Okay, it's because the American dollar was really strong against the Australian dollar, and after freight and everything, it was like $4,500, maybe close to $5,000.
Yeah.
However, when I just recently started looking at them again, the price has skyrocketed to almost $8,000. Now,
sell.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing in lathe manufacturers, right? Like you have a ton of companies that make lathes: Grizzly, Powermatic, Rikon, Laguna. The big quote tool companies that make everything also make lathes. Okay, all of those lathes, for the most part, fall in the $4,500 range. Then you have the lathe manufacturers. These are the guys that only make lathes.
Right.
You have American or Robust Tools up in, I think they're in Wisconsin. Yep. You have One Way, who's in Canada. You have Vicmark, who is in Australia. And those are kind of the big ones. All of those lathes new, like the American Beauty from Robust, is about a $10,000 lathe. The One Way is about a $7,500 lathe. Same thing with the Vicmark. It's about a $7,500 lathe. But they're just, they're built different. They are a lathe company that makes a lathe. They're not a tool company that also makes a lathe, if you catch my drift, right? So they understand what is needed in a lathe. So this particular lathe I bought, it's a VL300 CS. It was made in 2011. The CS stands for Craft Supply USA. So it was the Craft Supply out of Utah. It was their version of the VL300. So Vicmark made this for Craft Supply. It's a long bed, which I didn't necessarily want, but I'm okay with it. It is a long bed, 24-inch swing lathe, super well-built lathe. A lot of the world's best turners turn on Vicmarks, and I've had many people tell me that they are the best lathe in their opinions.
Right.
So I paid what I thought was a fair price for it. The gentleman that sold it, Larry, Larry and his wife Shirley are fantastic. They are some of my new favorite people. They are from Phil's hometown of Appleton, Wisconsin. So I drove 6.5 hours each way to get it. Did that last week. Had to get it out of Larry and Shirley's basement. But that was a adventure. I may have put a hole in one of their basement doors with a 2x4. Whoops. They would not let me buy them a new door. I was trying to buy them a new door, and they would not let me. They said it was the greatest story they've ever had.
They're going to frame it.
Yeah. So Larry was very, very sad to see his lathe go, but he is getting a new lathe. So,
all right.
Larry was not he wasn't selling his lathe to get out of turning. Larry's, I want to say he said he's 80. He's close to 80, I think. He has a bad back, and he does a lot of hollowing, so he doesn't like leaning over the lathe. He wanted a lathe he could slide the headstock to the end of the lathe and stand at the end without having to bend over.
Sure.
So completely legitimate, completely understand it. In 20 years, I'll probably feel the same way, and then this lathe will get sold to somebody else.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of my lathe story. It was, it's pretty awesome. It's my one stipulation when I bought this lathe from Larry, I paid him his asking price. I didn't negotiate it at all. What I said was I would buy it if he would include one of his turnings with it. So I took home one of his turnings as well, which is fun. So yeah, I'm excited to get it set up.
Cool. So how available are, and this shows my ignorance on lathes, for accessories? Like, is it pretty... Yeah, Vic Mark has a big distribution network in the U.S. Okay.
So you can always get parts for them.
Right.
It's one of the big differences between the Stubby and the Vic Mark. Stubby also made in Australia.
Yeah.
There used to be distributors in the U.S. There's a gentleman, Pedro, out of California that is now distributing them. They're just not seen. They have a huge cult following.
Right.
But there's not a huge network of them. Vic Mark, you can get, the bearings are standard bearings I can go buy from Granger. Everything's pretty easy. The only accessory that it doesn't have, it did not come with it standard. It's an add-on that I will probably pick up at some point, is an outboard turning rest.
No.
So the headstock doesn't move.
Right.
It has threads on the standard side for a chuck. The other side's a hand wheel, but you can remove that hand wheel and put the chuck on that side. So then you can turn stuff that it's like 6 foot in diameter.
Whoa.
And they sell a tool rest that bolts onto the base of the lathe, and the articulating arms comes out, and it's very odd. I'll put a picture on the show notes page.
Sure.
But I think that'd be fun to be able to turn. Like if I did a big round tabletop or something, that'd be fun to turn. Because who wants to use a router to do a profile when you can cut it in?
Right.
So.
Well, when you, then when you do a turned platter, like it's a turned platter.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But you can get like scroll chucks and drill chucks and whatever, and it's a relatively...
Oh, yeah. So, chucks are standard threaded, so there's usually like a 8x1 or a 1 1/4 by 8, the thread count and size. So yeah, everybody makes chucks. They'll all fit, but they won't all fit. If you have the right thread, they'll fit. So
yeah,
everything's pretty standard. Morse taper number 2.
Sure.
So everything I have for my small lathe downstairs will fit this. That's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out. Is do I keep my small lathe or not? I know all the turners all have 2 or 3 lathes.
Sure.
And kind of want to keep it.
Are you considering yourself a turner then?
I know. Or like, do I want to have it 2 lathes set up in my shop? Not really. I don't like that much crap. So maybe I'll pull like a Des Moines wood turners and put it on wheels and just push it in my storage side and let it sit out there, just so I have it as a backup. Because that's one thing that I told Larry when I got to his place on Friday. It's like, Larry, did you? Because I mailed him a check. I mailed him a cashier's check so he could order his new lathe. Because he said he wasn't going to order it until he got a check, so I mailed him a check. I said, did you order your new lathe yet? He's like, no, I haven't yet. I was like, Larry. He's like, well, I got a second lathe. And he did. He had another small Delta there. Like, everybody has two lathes, man. And I know a lot of people will set up their like buffing system on one, so you don't have to tear it down. So they'll use it with like the Beal buffing system that has 3 buffers on it. It slides into the Morse taper, tailstock holds it, and then that way when they're done turning something, they just go over and buff it. So
cool. Because I was thinking that, you know, your shop is going to be pretty generously sized, but I feel like real estate ends up disappearing pretty fast in it.
Yes, yeah. And it is. And now that I have the dividing wall built in my shop, I can kind of conceptualize how big of space I have. And yeah, it's like, okay, I can actually spread stuff out, which is my plan because I want room for photo equipment and video equipment. But you start adding additional pieces of machinery, it's like, that room's getting a little smaller and a little smaller every time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I even see it here on our video studio set where we have pretty much all the tools that we need. But when you set up some sawhorses to glue up a few panels or in between assemblies on even relatively small projects, you know, all of a sudden there's a cart now in the middle of the space and 2 sets of sawhorses with glue ups on it. And yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of space and we could probably move stuff around and fit it better, but it can fill up.
Yep. So, and I think that's where having some tools on wheels works well in most instances, where it's like, hey, we can roll it out of the way as long as it's not a Rikon lathe that has a broken wheel. Calling you out, Rikon.
Right. I mean, we've only been asking for that extra wheel for probably 2 years now.
Yeah.
So would you say
I'm
then,
excited to get the thing set up.
Yeah. So you obviously have probably a preference for a used or vintage tool. Are there things that you would only consider buying new?
No. See, I've had this argument with friends of mine over not only tools, over other stuff. I'm a huge fan of used stuff.
Right.
Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. As John said, he made the joke the other day that I like to help keep the economy going. But I'm still kind of a cheapskate. Like, if I can find a deal, I'm going to buy the deal.
Right.
Right. So I don't think there's the only tool I have personally bought new, like big tool, is my saw stop, I think. I mean, everything else I've bought has been used because I just can't justify it. Like, it's like, why? Like, I understand, and I have friends that they're like, I don't want somebody else's problem. It's like, well, that's not the case, man. It's that they are either not using it anymore or they just decide they want something different. And just because somebody decides they want something different doesn't mean there's anything wrong with what they're getting rid of. So, now I would say I would probably have a problem buying a used sawmill, but that's just me. Just because I would want everything to be flat and true from the get-go, and with the used one, you don't know that you might have some twist or something. But no, my preference is always to buy used. And when I'm looking at tools, my budget generally depends on value that I'm getting. So I might be looking at a planer, but I might not have a set budget, but I'm willing to spend more if I get more out of it, right? So like, if it's like, hey, I need a planer, 15 inches is the minimum size, I'd buy a 36-inch if it's a good deal. I might spend a little bit more on it, but I want to know that I'm getting a good deal, that I'm getting more value out of what I'm spending, and if it opens up other possibilities. So like a planer, for example. I want a big planer. I mean, if I want a big planer, to me it makes more sense just to get get the biggest one you can. Because buy once, cry once, right?
Sure.
Is kind of my thought. So if I'm going to invest in a tool, I don't want to say that I'm not going to buy one just to get me by, because I do have a Harbor Freight affinity too. So sometimes it's like, I'm not going to use it that much. Let's just Harbor Freight it. But like with big power tools, I would rather buy the best that I can afford and not have to worry about buying another one down the road.
Okay.
I guess.
Would that even mean that you would delay that purchase for months / years?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Until the right one comes up. I mean, to be completely honest, I have been looking for a big lathe for 3 years now.
Okay.
It's just there has never been one that I have been willing to pull the trigger on. Would I love an American Beauty from Robust? Yeah, but I'm not going to spend $9,000 on a lathe right now.
Yeah.
I know I just said buy once, cry once, but the value that I'm going to get out of that American Beauty, I'm getting the same value out of this Vicmark that was half that price. There's capacity-wise, there's no difference between the two lathes. They're about the American Beauty might be a little bit heavier, but with this base, I can add a ton of weight to it. So, in all practical purposes, they have the same capacity. They're going to work the same for me. Whereas something like the planer or, table saw, for example, I have my saw stop right now. I would like to upgrade to a vintage. It's not an upgrade, but I would like to switch out to a vintage table saw. There is a Fay and Egan for sale in Omaha. It's been for sale for about 8 months now. It's early 30s, late 20s one. It has a 16-inch blade. To me, it's like, I don't need the 16-inch blade, but God, it would sure be nice to be able to rip 5-inch stock on it, So it would be a little scary, yeah, maybe, but having the capacity to do that, I put pretty big value on. There's some things about that saw that I don't like, which is why I have not purchased it. And the guy's almost to the point where he's giving it away. He's close to giving it away. So yeah, there's some decision-making check marks that I want to go through when I'm thinking about buying a new tool and when I actually start looking for a new tool. So,
and I think you kind of just glanced by it a little bit, but it's kind of a moving target on what that best tool is, depending on who you
completely.
are. Because if you were a production turner, then your calculus on what lathe you get is different than you're an enthusiastic turner, but you're doing a bunch of other stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also put I put a pretty heavy weight on how much am I going to use it. So, I mean, that's not only tools. I just thought about that when I'm drinking my coffee. I use my coffee maker every day. So when I'm looking at coffee makers, I'm more apt to spend more money on a quality coffee maker because I use it every day, multiple times a day. It's like a drum sander in the shop. I am not going to spend that much on a drum sander because I'm not going to use it every day. Heck, I might not even use it every week. So to me, I'm going to put a lower value on that in my shop than I would the lathe, for example, which I'm expecting to use multiple times a week.
Yeah.
So,
John, how about you? What's your?
I'd kind of have to. Well, first of all, you can play the long game like I did and just get a job at a woodworking publishing company, and then you just wait until they get too many tools and sell them at auction, and you can just get them, dirt
Clean up.
That's true.
Play the long game, get the job at Woodsmith Magazine, and then you just clean out. So carts for like dollars.
Yeah.
You can't even get casters that cheap,
Nope.
So if you can't do that, I kind of agree with Logan on buying used tools because, it's with any big purchases, cars, especially in the hobbies, like sports equipment, woodworking stuff, golf clubs, treadmills. There are people that love to buy stuff new that have more money than I do, apparently, because they buy things new and for whatever reason, don't enjoy the hobby after a while or just aren't using it or whatever. And you can get used tools, at a discount. And I don't mind because I know, like, if I buy something new, I'm always like kind of babying stuff. And it's like, you don't want to be the first one to chip the paint or scuff the cast iron surface or anything like that. So it's like, if that little bit of wear is already done, then, it takes that off the table and you're ready to get in there and start using it. So you can always find good used tools out there for people that are, for whatever reason have just, moved on or don't use as much as they thought they would. Because I've done the same thing. I bought things and then it's like, oh, I didn't use this as much as I thought I would, and it's just taking up space. And I'm happy to, let it move on and clear up the space for something else. So I think it, and especially for us, we've been using a lot of tools and have learned stuff along the way that we can kind of judge on the quality of stuff and kind of find the best value and whatnot there. But there is always, stuff out there as far as used.
I will say, I will ask, have you guys ever been bitten by a tool purchase? Because I have one.
I don't think that I ever have. Like anything that it's like, oh my gosh, I bought a lemon and this is junk. And
yeah, mine wasn't necessarily a lemon, but it looked like a good deal on the surface, and then it wasn't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had that.
I had a.
It was
a small tool. It was, and I think I ended up giving it to you, Logan, to sell as a number 3 sized hand plane that I got because I really liked the size. Found it at a antique mall kind of place. It was a decent price that I thought at the time, and it turns out, that I didn't know as much as I thought I did about hand planes, and B, there were just some irregularities in how that plane was constructed that turned it into something that you would be constantly fiddling with rather than using.
Yeah. Is that the one you made the cherry tote knob for?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I still have that one in the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had those where it's like, small vintage tools. Like, it's like, hey, on the surface this looks great, but that screw was stuck and it broke off in the casting, and now it's become a parts plane. Oh, I've learned from that though. So whenever I buy those vintage hand planes or hand tools, I make sure it's a price that I can strip the parts and make my money back if I need to. I don't want to be bitten that bad by it. But the one I was thinking about was that Powermatic bandsaw I bought from the old video studio. Because I think John had put it up on cinder blocks and took the tires and rims off of it at one point. So
yeah, it was a parts machine.
Yeah, well, I knew when I bought it that it was missing some things, right? It was missing, like the switch.
It was the switch,
and the bearings were gone. Like the bearing assembly, I think, was gone. And the tensioning lever was gone. There was a lot of things that were missing on it. I didn't pay much for it. I think I paid maybe $300 for it. Which, it was a very low mileage bandsaw.
Right.
It was like, hey, it only got unloaded off the car trailer, went to the dealer, but then they took the tires off to put on another car. So I think I probably, because I ordered so many parts from Powermatic for that saw. I probably have $1,000 in that saw now. And it's like, oh, I mean,
It's like a brand new saw, though.
Yeah.
Well, oh, it is. It's a beautiful bandsaw. You know, it's like I put Carter guides on it. You know, those were $300. I put tires on it. I put I had to order all new quick release parts from Powermatic. So you know, I probably had $1,000 or $1,200 into that saw. Now I have that Laguna, so I'm probably going to sell that Powermatic. But speaking of not needing two bandsaws, I could see value in, but I don't need to do it.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, I guess that's the only thing. And it wasn't, like you said, that it was a lemon. It just was, on the surface, it looked like a really good deal. And then I started adding all the numbers up, and I'm like, oh, I should have just bought one from Powermatic. To be fair, the jointer's kind of the same way, a little bit. The big one, because it's like...
Yeah.
What I paid for it, and this goes back to the value thing that I was talking about. It's like, you know, what I paid for it, plus having a new cutter head made from Bird, plus sandblasting costs, plus, you know, I'm going to have some parts machined and poured and stuff. I couldn't have bought a 24-inch. You know, I'm going to be a quarter of what a new 24-inch machine would be.
Right.
However, I could have bought a 16-inch for that price.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be as cool as this, so there's that too. But
yeah, so there's a lot that goes into buying tools, you know, because I am definitely of the thrifty sort and will avoid tool purchases. And then, you know, most of my big tools are used. The only one that I have that was new is my planer, which I got. And part of the reason was in my garage, I wanted a lunchbox style planer. And having seen us use the DeWalt 735 here for years and years, I knew that it was a solid planer. And my calculus on that is I taught woodworking seminars at the Woodsmith store here in town for years, and they paid in gift cards to the store. So I hoarded my gift cards until I had the money to be able to buy the planer from the store. So that's how I ended up with that one. And it's been a really sweet machine. Mm-hmm. So other than that, I think the only other tools that I've bought that were new were my routers. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, routers and like cordless drills. But a lot of that has to do with just the fact of what those kind of tools are. I mean, nobody gets all jacked up about having a 65-year-old hand router, you know, because that thing's going to weigh 43 pounds.
There's a reason. Yeah.
I was going to say, router, like small power tools or battery operated tools, that's stuff I would buy new.
Yeah.
Because they've improved drastically over time, and, you know, batteries, they wear out. They're the most expensive thing usually. So you usually want to get stuff with new batteries and that kind of thing, I guess.
See, I agree with that as far as the battery powered tools go. Routers are one thing that I actually think I would buy used.
Oh, yeah?
Like, as you know, I'm not going to buy a Black & Decker,
right?
You know, not knocking Black & Decker, but knocking Black & Decker. But I would completely consider buying a used, and I have actually bought a used 690 Porter Cable 690, tried and true, right? I think I bought a used 7518 or 7519, like the big 3 1/4 horse one, 3.5 horse. Because those machines, you know, or those routers they're pretty bulletproof. You might need to do new brushes or maybe a new switch in them, but you can get those parts.
Right.
So if you compare the price of like a new, I mean, they don't make new 690s anymore, but it was probably $250, $300 router.
Yeah, depending on when you bought it.
Maybe $200. Yeah. So, and if you could buy a used one for $65, $70,
yeah,
Heck yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
And
like you said,
who doesn't need an extra router?
Yeah, the replacement parts are widely available. It's not like you're only getting them from Porter Cable or whatever. You can find a lot of that stuff at McMaster Carr or Reed or whatever. So,
yeah. Now, I do think that brings up a good point. The fact that I feel like, and I think most people would agree with me, stuff today is not made to repair like it used to be, or made to be repaired like it used to be. Like, Porter Cable offered brushes, switches, everything like that. Collets. I mean, you could buy parts for your routers.
Yeah.
Same thing with vintage drills and stuff like that. You could buy replacement parts. I think if you called Ryobi and said, "Hey, my drill stopped working. I need a new trigger assembly for it," they'd be like, "You're dumb." Like it's a $32 drill. Go buy a new one.
Yeah.
Which I hate that mentality, but that's how we are today, kind of. As a society, I think, which is dumb. But I only say that because I knocked my Ryobi drill off the ladder in the shop the other day, and it stopped working.
Oh, maybe you got to knock it again. It's like amnesia. You just got to hit it on the head again.
Yeah.
I decided that it was time to switch off of Ryobi slowly, so I started doing that.
All right.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So I think the other, both of you have talked about it, but one thing that I would think about when considering buying tools is I consider myself a hobbyist. And so one of the main features of something is like how, what my use of it is going to be in an appropriate amount. Like I'm not going to, I'm going to spend money on a tool that I know that I'm going to get a lot of use out of, or is really going to help me do X, Y, and Z. And I will avoid purchasing tools because I know that I just don't. I have a lot of other stuff going on. I'd like to do more woodworking than I do, but at the level that I am, I just look at it as I'm a hobbyist and I have lots of other stuff that, I have priorities for where that money needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I probably underestimate that sometimes. Because I was talking about this with my brother-in-law and father-in-law over Christmas. Because you had gotten a domino in for some articles and a review for Popular Woodworking. And I used it on my sister's dining table and the base for the sideboard that I'm building for Popular Woodworking. And in just that short amount of time, like I could really see the value of it. And I could see, and in talking through it and talking out loud, like I could find value in purchasing a domino for the type of projects that I build. And it would be, but only because I've spent years doing very similar things with loose tenon joinery with a router, biscuits, and all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Well, and I think that is, I mean, you make a good point. You could do it with other things. Like you could do loose tenon joinery with other tools and other ways to do it. But after you factor in, a router, you factor in the time to build the jig, the time to set it up, stuff like that. There's a point in my personal work style that I put a lot of value on the time. So it's like I could make a jig for every project that I need to do loose tenons with, or I can make a universal one. But the time I'm going to invest in building that jig, it's not going to be probably as accurate as the domino.
right.
Like, yeah, it's a big tool purchase, but it's also a huge time saver. So I get it. Like that is one of the few. The Festool stuff is stuff that I would consider buying used as well.
Oh, sure.
And there's a very good used market for it, and it sells for like 80% of retail when it sells used. So,
All right. There you go. I'd love to hear what you guys, listeners, have about your process for buying tools. Are you a new tool purchaser and why? Or a used tool purchaser, or maybe a tool flipper? You buy a bunch of tools, flip them, and then buy something super cool with that. You can email us, woodsmith@woodsmith.com, or you can leave your comments in the comments section on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out the show notes page where we'll put some photos up of some of the things we've been talking about. I'm also going to put up a link in light of our last episode on auxiliary work surfaces, and we talked about John's sawhorse design that he's working on. I'm going to put up a link to a free plan on what I consider the ultimate sawhorse plan that we've featured in ShopNotes magazine in light of its launching. So you want to check out both I'll put a link on the description on the YouTube channel as well for that. But if you're looking to build sawhorses, I have a plan for you. So otherwise, we'll see you next week on the ShopNotes podcast. Bye, everybody.